The sun was just beginning to rise over the Lakeside Country Club in Los Angeles. It was May 1968. Calm skies, perfect greens, not a soul watching. Just two legends, Dean Martin and Bob Hope, standing shoulder to shoulder on the first tee. The stakes? $50,000. Winner takes all. One round. 18 holes. Loser writes the check. But here's what no one, not even Bob, knew that morning. Dean Martin had no intention of winning that game. Not because he couldn't. In fact, Dean was a scratch golfer, one of the best amateur players in all of Hollywood. He'd beaten Bob Hope on the golf course so many times it had become a quiet joke among their circle. Dean had the swing, the composure, the unshakable rhythm of a natural athlete. But this time, Dean was playing a different game altogether. This wasn't about golf. Not really. It was about ego, friendship, and a plan so subtle, so masterful, that the man he beat would walk away thinking he had finally won. As they shook hands before teeing off, Bob Hope was grinning from ear to ear. Finally, a real chance to take down Dean Martin, fair and square. What he didn't realize was that Dean already had a different victory in mind. One that would make Bob Hope laugh, cry, and feel like a champion, all in the same breath. Because this $50,000 golf match wasn't going to end with a trophy or a deposit slip. It was going to end with a twist so heartfelt and so brilliant that even decades later, Hollywood insiders still whisper about it. But to understand what really happened that day, we have to rewind. Because the story doesn't start on the golf course. It starts with who Bob Hope was and why losing to Dean Martin drove him absolutely insane. In 1968, Bob Hope wasn't just a comedian. He was a living institution, a titan of American entertainment. By then, he'd spent over 30 years dominating the world of radio, film, television, and live performance. He had performed in front of kings and presidents. He'd been the face of wartime morale, traveling halfway across the globe to entertain American troops from World War II to Vietnam. But beneath the tuxedos, the monologues, and the million-dollar smile, Bob Hope was ferociously competitive. He didn't just want to be good. He wanted to be the best, the funniest, the sharpest, the most beloved. And that drive extended far beyond the stage. It seeped into everything he did. Ratings, reviews, audience reactions, and especially golf. Golf wasn't just a game for Bob Hope. It was his thing, his sanctuary, his battlefield, and his scoreboard all wrapped into one. He'd organized celebrity tournaments, played alongside presidents and CEOs, and made sure his name was synonymous with fairways and sand traps. He practiced constantly, took private lessons, tracked his handicap with the same intensity other men tracked stock portfolios. Bob Hope wasn't the kind of guy who enjoyed a round of golf. He was the guy who needed to win at it. And yet, no matter how much he practiced, no matter how much he tried, there was one man he just couldn't beat. Dean Martin. It didn't make sense. Dean wasn't a man obsessed with victory. He didn't train. He didn't read books on technique. Half the time he'd stroll up to the tee after 2 martinis and still outshoot Bob by 5 strokes. While Bob was focused, analytical, laser-locked on every shot, Dean was loose, relaxed, effortless. And that, more than anything, drove Bob Hope crazy. He never said it outright. He'd crack jokes, deflect, roll his eyes. But losing to Dean over and over again, it chipped away at him. How could a man who treated the game like an afterthought keep coming out on top? So when Bob casually suggested a $50,000 winner-takes-all game over drinks one night at the Friars Club, it wasn't just about money. It was about finally flipping the script. But Dean's response wasn't what Bob expected. A smirk, a raised eyebrow, and 5 words that should have made Bob pause. Of losing? No. Of winning? Maybe. Bob laughed it off at the time. He thought Dean was just being witty. But that line, that strange, offhand remark, was actually the first glimpse into a master plan. Because Dean Martin wasn't afraid to lose. He was about to engineer a loss so perfect, so precise, that even the man who won wouldn't realize what really happened until it was too late. They smiled for cameras. They laughed on television. They shared stages, cocktails, and charity events. But behind the charm, behind the banter, Dean Martin and Bob Hope were locked in a silent, one-sided rivalry that stretched for decades. They and Oppos, deep been golfing together since the late 1940s. Sometimes with Bing Crosby, sometimes with Sinatra, but often it was just the two of them. Early morning tea times, cigars in hand, walking side by side across pristine California fairways. And Bob almost never won. Dean made it look effortless. He moved like a cat, fluid, calm, balanced. He didn't overthink it. He just lined up the shot and let it rip. Pure muscle memory. Pure talent. No drama. No fuss. Meanwhile, Bob Hope trained like an Olympic hopeful. He hired instructors, studied his swing, obsessively tracked his stats. He wanted this. He needed this. And every time Dean beat him, it dug a little deeper. But Bob never let it show. He'd joke about it, laugh it off with lines like, "Dean only plays drunk because it's the only way I stand a chance." People thought it was part of their routine, just two legends roasting each other for fun. But it wasn't fun for Bob. It gnawed at him. Quietly. Persistently. How could Dean, a guy who looked half asleep on the course, always win? He never said it out loud. But to the people closest to him, it was obvious. Bob didn't just want to win. He wanted to beat Dean. Just once. To prove something to himself. To prove that hard work and discipline could outmatch natural grace. So in early 1968, he decided to make it official. No more casual matches. No more friendly rounds. If he was going to finally take Dean down, it had to be real. Unmistakable. No excuses. No doubt. He'd beat Dean in a straight-up, high-stakes battle, where the loser would feel it in their wallet. That's when he made the offer. "Next time we play," Bob said one night, swirling his drink, "let's make it interesting. Winner takes $50,000. Dean leaned back in his chair, eyebrow raised. "That's a lot of money, Bob," he said, with that slow, smoky voice. Bob didn't blink. "You scared?" Dean smiled. "Of losing?" "No." "Of winning?" "Maybe." It was a strange answer. But Bob was too locked in on the game to notice. He was finally going to get his shot. His redemption. His victory. What he didn't realize was this. Dean Martin had already started playing. And his strategy wasn't about winning. It was about knowing exactly how to lose. Once the number was on the table, there was no walking it back. $50,000. Cash. One round of golf. Winner takes everything. They weren't talking on a stage or in front of cameras. This wasn't a publicity stunt. It was late, quiet, and private. Two men sitting at the Friars Club with half-empty glasses and decades of history between them. Bob Hope wasn't joking. This wasn't bravado. This was personal. Dean studied him for a moment. Not the comedian. Not the legend. The man. Then Dean nodded. "All right, Bob. You're on." No crowd. No gallery. No press. Just the two of them. 18 holes. Lakeside Country Club. Saturday morning. May 1968. Clean scorecard. No handicaps. No excuses. To Bob, this was the ultimate test. If he won, it meant something. It meant he'd finally beaten Dean Martin fair and square. And if he lost, well, at least he'd gone all in. Dean, on the other hand, walked away from that agreement already thinking several moves ahead. That night, long after Bob went home replaying imaginary shots in his head, Dean picked up the phone and called his accountant. "I'm going to need a $50,000 donation set up," Dean said calmly. The accountant paused. "A donation?" "Yes. St. Jude Children's Research Hospital." "All right, when should it go through?" "Sunday afternoon." Another pause. "And whose name should it be under?" Dean didn't hesitate. "Bob Hope." The line went quiet. "Dean, are you sure?" "You don't need to understand it," Dean said. "Just make sure it's done." And with that, he hung up. By the time Bob Hope went to bed that night, he was dreaming about fairways, putts, and finally, beating Dean Martin. What he didn't know was that the money he was planning to win had already been spoken for, and the game hadn't even started yet. Saturday morning came with postcard-perfect weather. Crisp air, blue skies, a light breeze rustling the trees at Lakeside Country Club. It was the kind of morning that made you believe something special was about to happen. Bob Hope arrived early, energized. Today wasn't just another round, it was the round. The game that could finally flip the balance. For the first time in years, Bob felt like the underdog with a real shot. He was locked in, focused. Dean Martin strolled up minutes later, unbothered, casual as ever. A half smile on his face, sunglasses on, and a drink. Maybe his first of the day, maybe not. He looked like a man ready to enjoy a quiet round of golf, not one who was about to risk $50,000. They shook hands, exchanged a few friendly jabs, then teed up. The match began. Bob's opening drive was solid, clean, straight, respectable distance. His confidence swelled. Then Dean stepped up. His swing? Effortless. The ball soared, longer than Bob's by at least 20 yards. Bob's smile faded. Here we go again, he thought. Dean's gonna wipe the floor with me. But then, something strange. Dean's second shot, a smooth 7-iron, missed the green and landed just short, in the bunker. Not by much. Not embarrassingly. Just enough to miss. Bob, meanwhile, landed softly on the green. Dean got out of the sand, but then 3-putted. Bob 2-putted. Won the first hole. Dean grinned. Nice playing, Bob. Bob beamed. Maybe today's my day. He had no idea. Dean was calibrating every move. Every drive just a few yards off. Every putt just a little too hard. Not sloppy. Not suspicious. Just enough to seem like an off day. He'd miss by inches. Land in the rough, but not in the trees. His body language was relaxed, maybe too relaxed. Bob, meanwhile, was too swept up in his own performance to notice. By the 5th hole, he was up 3 strokes. By the turn 4, Bob was glowing. Excited. His hands moved more when he talked. He analyzed every hole, every shot, like a man who'd cracked some hidden code. Dean listened, smiled, sipped his drink. You're playing great today, Bob. Thanks. I don't know what it is. Everything's just clicking. Dean knew exactly what it was. And he wasn't about to tell him. The back 9 was more of the same. Bob stayed consistent. Not extraordinary, but solid. Confident. Focused. Dean kept himself on the edge, never letting Bob get too far ahead, but never catching up either. By the 18th hole, it was over. Mathematically, Bob had already won. Dean shook his hand. Great game, Bob. You played fantastic. Bob's face lit up. He'd finally done it. Right there, on the green, Dean pulled out his checkbook. Wrote the number, $50,000. Handed it over with a smile. Signed and sealed. You earned it, pal. Bob held the check like it was a trophy. Victory. At last. He had no idea that piece of paper was never meant to reach his bank account. Because the real move, the brilliant move, had already been made. The next morning, Bob Hope strolled into his bank like a man on top of the world. He was still buzzing from the win. Not just because he'd beat Dean Martin, finally, but because it meant something. He'd proven to himself, to Dean, maybe even to the ghosts of every game he'd lost, that he had what it took. He walked up to the teller with a swagger and handed over the $50,000 check Dean had signed on the 18th green. Good morning, Bob said. I'd like to deposit this. The teller took the check, smiled politely, typed a few things into her terminal. Then, her expression shifted. She looked back at Bob. I'm sorry, Mr. Hope, but this check has already been cashed. Bob blinked. I'm sorry, what? It was cashed yesterday. 3:47 p.m. The funds were transferred to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Bob stared at her, completely thrown. St. Jude? But this is my check. Dean made it out to me. She nodded. According to the records, yes. But the donation was made in your name, Mr. Hope. Bob didn't say anything. He just stood there, stunned, his hands still hovering in midair as if waiting for the check to be handed back. The money was gone. But more than that, the check wasn't just cashed. It had been converted into a charitable donation. A $50,000 contribution to St. Jude, credited entirely to Bob Hope. He walked out of the bank in a daze, got into his car, sat in silence. Confusion hit first, then disbelief, then admiration, and finally, he started to laugh. That son of AB********H. Dean hadn't just let him win. He'd orchestrated it. Carefully, quietly, flawlessly. Dean gave him the win, gave him the ego boost. Let him float on cloud 9 for an entire day. Let him frame that moment in his mind as the time he finally beat Dean Martin. And then he took the check and used it for something far more powerful. He gave $50,000 to children in need and gave Bob the credit for it. Bob didn't know whether to scream, cry, or hug the guy. So instead, he drove straight to Dean's house. Bob Hope didn't call. He didn't schedule a lunch. He didn't send a message through a manager or an assistant. He just got in his car and drove straight to Dean Martin's house. The check was gone. The money was gone. And Bob's name was now stamped on a $50,000 donation he never made. He needed answers. But more than that, he needed to see Dean and Apos' face when he asked the question. Dean's housekeeper greeted him at the door. Mr. Hope, what a nice surprise. Is Dean home? He's out back, by the pool. Bob walked through the house without saying another word. Past the polished piano, past the quiet living room, out onto the sun-soaked patio, where Dean Martin was exactly where you and Appos D expect him to be, lounging in a recliner, drink in one hand, newspaper in the other, sunglasses on, not a care in the world. Dean looked up, saw Bob, and smiled. "Bob, what a pleasant surprise. You want a drink?" Bob stood there for a beat, then walked over and sat down across from him. He stared at Dean. "You sneaky bastard." Dean's smile widened. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "The check," Bob said. "The $50,000 check. You donated it. To St. Jude. In my name." Dean shrugged, took a sip of his drink. "Did I? I don't recall that. But if someone did donate $50,000 to St. Jude in your name, well, you should probably thank them. That's a beautiful gesture." Bob let out a breath somewhere between a scoff and a laugh. "You let me win," he said, shaking his head. "You threw the game." Dean's eyes twinkled. "Can you prove that? Your drive on the 7th hole landed 10 yards short of where you always hit it. Your putt on 14? You've sunk that one 100 times. You missed it by an inch." Dean leaned back, unbothered. "Sounds like I had an off day. Sounds like you're full of." Dean laughed. So did Bob. But then the laughter faded, and the question came quietly. "Why'd you do it?" Dean looked over at his friend. The smile softened. The joking tone disappeared. "Because you're my friend, Bob. And that win, it mattered to you. More than the money ever could matter to me." Bob said nothing. He just listened. "So you got your win," Dean continued. "And a big donation goes to sick kids who need it. And you get the credit. Everybody wins." Bob's eyes were starting to sting. "You could have just beaten me," he said. "Taken the money. Bought yourself another Cadillac." Dean shook his head. "And you'd have been gracious about it. I know that. But inside, it would have eaten at you. You would have replayed every hole in your mind. You would have carried it like a weight. I've seen how you get when you lose." Bob nodded. It was true. He hated losing. Hated how it stuck to him. "I didn't want that," Dean said. "I wanted you to have a great day. I wanted that money to do something good. And I wanted to mess with you just a little bit." Bob wiped his eyes. "You're impossible, you know that. I've been told. And you're not getting that money back. St. Jude has it now. It's in my name. I'm taking credit for it." Dean smiled. "Good. You should." And just like that, the tension melted. They sat together for another hour, by the pool, sipping drinks, telling stories, laughing the way only two old friends can. In Hollywood, where everything was about ego, fame, and winning, Dean Martin had managed to lose on purpose and still come out as the smartest, kindest guy in the room. And Bob Hope? He walked away with more than just a win. He walked away with a lesson he'd never forget. The story of Dean Martin and Bob Hope's legendary golf match spread through Hollywood like wildfire. Everyone knew the basics. Bob Hope finally beat Dean Martin. Dean handed over a $50,000 check. That money went to St. Jude Children's Hospital in Bob's name. But almost no one knew the full truth. They didn't know Dean had lost on purpose. They didn't know he spent 18 holes walking a razor-thin line, playing just badly enough to lose without ever making it look fake. They didn't know that the real game wasn't played with clubs or putts, but with empathy, friendship, and a deep understanding of another man's pride. Over the years, Bob Hope told the story often, and every time, it hit harder. "Dean Martin is the only man I know," Bob once said, "who'd let me beat him at golf, let me think I'd finally won fair and square, and then donate my winnings to charity in my name. That's not just generosity," he added. "That's psychology." It wasn't about charity. It was about emotional intelligence. About knowing someone so well, you understand exactly what they need, even when they don't. Bob needed that win. Dean didn't. And the kids at St. Jude needed that money more than either of them. In 1995, when Dean Martin passed away, Bob Hope spoke at his memorial service. He stood in front of the crowd, hands trembling slightly, voice soft. And he told the story again. The game, the check, the twist. By the end, Bob was in tears. "Dean let me win," he said. "And in doing so, he taught me something about winning I'd never understood before. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't beating your opponent. It's making your opponent feel like they've beaten you, and using that moment to do something good." That game wasn't just a prank. It wasn't just a charitable gesture. It was a masterclass in kindness. Dean Martin didn't need applause. He didn't need recognition. He never even told anyone what he did. Because for Dean, winning quietly, lifting up a friend, sparing an ego, helping sick children, meant more than any trophy ever could. In the end, Bob Hope got the glory. St. Jude got the money. And Dean Martin? Dean walked away as the only man in Hollywood who could lose a $50,000 golf game and still win in every way that mattered.